Hi, my name is Mandi Scott, and I'm a chef instructor here at the Pennsylvania School of Culinary Arts in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We're part of the YTI family, the New York Technical Institute, and also recently the PCI family, which is a company out of Massachusetts. Like I said, I'm a chef instructor here. I'm a certified executive pastry chef, and our school is accredited by the American Culinary Federation. And we're going to be making apple pie today. It's one of the basics, and one of the first things you learn as a student in the pastry arts program. So in our introduction to baking class, which is one of the classes that I frequently teach, it's your first lab class as a pastry student, and we go through all of the mixing methods that are foundation skills for any pastry chef. So mixing pie dough and then assembling a fruit pie is probably one of the first things you would do in the first month you're at school. And we'll go through the steps here with you today. Okay, the first step to making a fruit pie is making a really good pie crust. And we're using Daisy organic flour today, and a good ratio, because baking is all about ratios and chemistry. The ratio that I'm using for our pie dough today is 3-to-1. So it's 3 parts by weight flour to 2 parts of fat. We're using butter and shortening, and 1 part of water. And like I said, again, these are by weight, so it's 12 ounces of flour, 8 ounces of fat, 4 ounces of water, and then I also add a little bit of salt just for flavor. Since the filling is sweet, we need a little bit of balance there. So we start by putting the flour in a large bowl. Next, I'm going to add about a teaspoon of kosher salt, and just mix that in with your fingertips. The next ingredients we add are the cold butter, and I also have cold shortening. And I usually just leave it in the refrigerator overnight. We're going to gently coat those pieces of fat with the flour. And the reason that we're doing this, this is called cutting in fat. The reason we do this is twofold. Number one, it helps to coat some of these pieces of flour with fat to kind of make a moisture barrier, so that when the pie is baked, the flour won't get soggy, meaning the pie crust won't get soggy. The second reason is that we cut the fat in like this is we're going to leave some big chunks. And the chunks are then, after it's baked, going to turn into flakes, because as the heat hits the fat, it melts away, the steam is released, and it creates an air pocket or a flake. So you can do this by using 2 forks. Some people do this in a food processor. You can use a pastry blender. I just like doing it by hand. It's easy and it's one less dish to wash. So as you can see, the flour is starting to turn a little bit yellow in color. Here's some flour that hasn't been mixed at all, and you can see the color difference. And that's one of the indicators that we know that this is getting close to being done. Our next step is to add some cold water. Leighann, can you scale 4 ounces of cold water for me, please? So you can see here that there are some big chunks of cold fat left in here. But the rest of it is pretty much like wet sand or cornmeal. And it's really important for good pie crust that all of your ingredients are as cold as possible. So cold fat, and I have some ice water over here that we're just going to scale at the last minute. So pour all the water in at once. And then we're just going to bring it together gently. When flour and water come in contact, there's a substance that's activated. It's a protein. That's called gluten. And gluten is the elastic network that holds things together. So for something like pie crust that we want to be flaky and tender, we don't want to activate the gluten very much at all. So by gently mixing, we're going to help to eliminate that. So after the pie crust comes together, I'm just going to pick up some of the little dry pieces here, just by gently kneading it on the table. I'm going to divide the dough in half, and then we're just going to pat it into a disc. So this is to ensure that when it's chilling, it's going to chill evenly. The center will still be warm, And if it's in a circular shape, it's easier to keep in a circular shape than your boat. So we're going to wrap these in plastic and put them in the refrigerator for, I would say, at least a half an hour. It's better if you can do this overnight. But we have some dough ready, so we can continue. After your pie dough has been chilled, we're just going to pull one piece out at a time. And you're going to generously flour the bench. In baking, the bench is the table. And I'm just warming it up with the heat of my hands, just so that it rolls evenly without cracking. I'm going to put a little bit of flour on each side of the dough, and then just a tiny bit of flour on my rolling pin. And we're going to push forward and roll backward, and then you're going to turn the dough 90 degrees. Push forward, push backwards, and turn. So we're helping to keep it in a round shape, and we're also, by moving it frequently, preventing it from sticking to the table. We want the dough to be between about 1/8 and 1/16 of an inch. And then I'm going to take my pie pan, flip it over onto the dough. And with about 2 inches beyond the pan, I'm just going to trim the dough to what we're going to work with. Take away the excess. And then there are several ways to get this into the pan. My favorite way is just folding it in quarters and then move it to the pan. You want to try to avoid stretching the dough as much as possible, because when it hits the heat of the oven, it's going to shrink. So you never want to force it down into the pan. You want to lift it up gently and then slide it into the bottom. If there's a little bit extra, a pair of scissors works great to trim the extra salvage edge of the dough. We want to have about an inch, half an inch to an inch on the edges, because when we fill it with apples, we're going to use the crust on the side to connect the top crust of the pie. The next step in our pie is to prepare our filling. So we're making an apple pie today, and we're using Granny Smith apples because this is what we have on hand here at the school, but you can use any firm apple. I prefer one that's kind of on the tart side because we're going to be adding sugar and spices to it, but it's really up to your taste. The firmness, just because after it bakes you don't want it to turn into applesauce. I used to work at an orchard before I was an instructor here at YTI, and so I know a little bit about apples, and I'll tell you that Honeycrisp makes the best apple pie I've ever tasted. They're also an excellent apple just for eating. John Gold's, Jonathan, Rome, Gala, those are all good apples for pie. So I'm just cutting down through the apple halfway and then cutting it in quarters. And our goal here is to remove the core. So carefully, just make a straight cut there to remove the core. And you can trim off any of the peel that you may have missed. Then with each quarter, I'm going to cut that in half down through the long side, and then cut those pieces in half. So with each quarter, you should make quarters, giving you 16 pieces out of one apple. It's helpful to keep the sizes consistent so that they bake evenly, so that way you won't have pieces of apple that are still firm and pieces that are soft and mushy. To save time, I've prepared prepared some apples ahead, and I've kept them in what's called acidulated water, and it's just a fancy term for saying there's acid in the water to stop the apples from oxidizing or turning brown. I like to use lemon juice because I like the flavor, but you could also add a little bit of cream of tartar, or you could use just plain vinegar. So to prepare our filling, we're going to remove the apples from the water. And this is about 6 apples. It's close to 2 pounds once they're all peeled. And then I'm going to mix up my spice mixtures separately. So I have a few ounces of sugar. It's about half of a cup of brown sugar. And 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. And the cornstarch is just going to act as a thickener. I like to mix it with the sugar because if it hits the apples and any other cold liquid, it's going to start to kind of clump together. And we just want to avoid getting any clumps of starch in our finished pie. We're also going to add a little bit of kosher salt, and then our spices. A teaspoon of cinnamon, a pinch of cloves, a quarter of a teaspoon of nutmeg, and I really like ginger with apples, so I'm using a half teaspoon of ginger. Mix those together, and then we're going to add those to the apples. This is called the old-fashioned method of making pie filling. There's also cooked juice and cooked fruit, but those we would use for things like berries or fruits that need to be softened a lot. Sometimes you'll get what's called an air gap in the pie, where the filling is here and the pie crust is here, and you have this gap of open space. And to prevent that, you would make a cooked apple filling or cooked fruit. But I found that with these particular apples, it doesn't happen so much. They're a little bit underripe, so their water content is a little bit less, and it hasn't been a problem for us. So that's why we're using the old-fashioned method. Our final step in putting together our apple pie is to get our top crust prepared and to fill our pie shell that we made a few minutes ago. So the first thing we're going to do is take the apples that we've mixed with the sugars, the thickeners, and the spices, and pile them into the shell. It's going to look like too many apples, but just keep putting them in there. They're going to shrink down a good bit when they bake. You do want to try to keep that edge of the crust as dry as possible, though. And the last thing we're going to add to our filling is a few pieces of butter, just to give it some extra richness and flavor. And we're just tucking these in. If you put them on the bottom of the crust, they'll make the crust soggy when it bakes, and if you put it on the top, it has a tendency to boil out into the steam holes. So you want to make sure that we tuck them in so that they melt evenly through the pie. Our next and final step is to roll out our top crust. There are 3 ways that you can top a fruit pie. This is one method. Another method would be to create a lattice top, which is strips that are cut and woven. And the last way is to make a crumb topping, and I'll include that in the recipe that you can find in the links on the bottom of the screen. So just like we did with our bottom crust, push away, roll towards yourself, and turn 90 degrees. And you can probably see the big chunks of butter in the dough. That's a good sign, because that means our dough is going to be extra flaky. So I'm going to use the pan as a guide and cut a large circle. And then carefully lift your pie crust up, and you want to evenly cover those apples and make sure you have a little bit of dough overhanging on the edge. I'm going to trim that down just a little bit. If there's too much dough on the sides, when you crimp the sides closed and you bake it, they never quite get crispy. They stay doughy and raw flour doesn't taste the best. So again, we want to avoid stretching as much as possible, but I am just securing this to the bottom crust, just pinching it a little bit. And the next thing is we're going to roll under that extra salvage edge. So hopefully you'll be able to see this, but you just want to tuck that top crust under the bottom crust. And that makes a nice seal so that when it bakes, everything stays in the pie shell where it's supposed to be. Just pinch on. Just to make it look pretty, I'm going to put a little bit of flour on my fingertips and I'm going to crimp the edge. And then to let any steam escape, we're going to cut some steam holes in the top of the crust. And you can use a small cookie cutter for this. You can use a piping tip that has a large round hole, or you can just use your paring knife and cut any design possible. I know some people prefer pie to cake, and for those people, I will cut your initials on the top of the pie so that you can stick a candle right in there. It makes a great substitute birthday cake. So this is ready to bake. We're going to move it over here to have a sheet pan ready to go, and it's lined with a piece of parchment paper. I'm going to put some pan spray on the parchment paper because as this cooks, the juice is going to caramelize, and we all know that caramelized sugar is very sticky, so we want to be able to get this off the pan. If you're using a glass or a ceramic pie dish to bake your pie, you can put the pie directly on the rack in the oven and then put a tray underneath of it to catch any juices that drip from the pie. That way you don't have to clean your oven. So we're going to bake this at 375 degrees. It's going to take roughly an hour, maybe a little bit longer. But the best way to check it is to take a small spatula and carefully lift up the edge of the crust so that you can see the side. Once that's brown, you know you're done. Another way to check it would be to take your paring knife and test to see how soft the fruit is. You can cut right down through your steam vents so that there's no holes left in the crust. So here's our finished apple pie, and I've cut a piece out of it, and you can see inside. There is a small air gap, but it's minimal, and I think as a chef, it's totally acceptable to have a little bit of room between the crust. So this will be served warm, cold, of course, a la mode. I think it's everybody's favorite with a little bit of vanilla ice cream. And I would definitely wait till the pie cools to cut it, otherwise the juices are going to bush all over the place and you're going to have a mess of crust on it rather than a piece of pie. But if you'd like to learn more about the pastry program or our culinary program here at YTI, please stop on our website. We'll have the link included at the end of the video, and I welcome anyone to come in and at least shadow us for a day if this is something that you're interested in. Thank you so much to Lazy Flour. Good luck with your home baking, and enjoy the pie crust.